Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Amanda and this is Pie Wacket. My handle is @paganballerina, and in this video I wanted to respond to the latest episode of Amanpour and Company that aired on Friday, March 27th. So there were a number of items from that episode that caught my attention, that is in line with what I've been talking about on this channel, and I wanted to respond to a couple of things directly. So the first thing I wanted to respond to was Christian Amanpour's interview dialogue with Hamidreza Mohammadi, the brother of Narges Mohammadi, who has been imprisoned in Iran multiple times for, I think, since the late 90s. I first heard of Narges Mohammadi when I was in my master's program at Northeastern at NEIU in Chicago, which is coincidentally like literally right next to the WTTW studio, WTTW Chicago studio. Literally, like, they share a sidewalk. Anyway, when I started doing my master's thesis on women's rights in Iran. However, the university kind of, did a crackdown on my thesis, and I had to change gears, and I ended up doing it on something environmental. However, so that was when I first heard of Narges Mohammadi with her activism. So this was in like 2015. So at that time, she was also imprisoned in Iran for activism for women's rights, and which was what I started doing my thesis on, and later went on to do my dissertation on. That also didn't happen for myriad reasons. However, the point I wanted to make about this is that continuing to echo her voice is so important. This is someone who is in the country, who is living in these conditions, who's trying to make it a better place from the inside, and we can see that this is insurmountable. So many people have left the country to be able to live the life that they would like to lead in their home, at their home, and it's not possible. And we need to keep hearing about these women, these people who are trying to make a change inside the country, and it's not working. This is why, the country is asking, the citizens are asking for this outside help, for outside forces to help them out of this peril, because it is like going up against a brick wall. They're being imprisoned in some of the worst conditions, in some of the worst prisons globally, and their voices need to continue to be echoed. Their voices cannot be lost in everything else that's happening in this world. This is a country that is highly educated. The citizens are highly educated, and they're being held down by an extremely oppressive regime. And that is, I hate to see that get lost amongst everything else that's going on. These are people that are actively fighting to have their rights restored and to be able to live the lives that they were living back when the monarchy was functioning, back when the Shah was ruling. They had they had the equality that they don't have anymore because of the Islamic Republic, and I am so grateful that her voice was being echoed again on Friday, and we need to keep hearing these voices. We can't let this just fade away into the background and, you know, be proliferated by another oil war, right? Like this is the war. And thank you so much for continuing to echo this voice, which is not just one voice. How many others are imprisoned for the same thing? And beyond that, the number of women who are living their lives in this, who are, you know, anyway, it's just, I'm so grateful that these voices are not getting lost in the background. The next point of discussion is the interview with Bill McKibben, who is an activist and an environmentalist, an American activist and environmentalist. So this is regarding the global energy crisis that has been spawned by the U.S.-Israel war with Iran. So Bill McKibben had stated that this war is exuding more emissions than we were exuding back in the 70s when the environmental movements started to form and take shape. So we're worse off now from this war, according to Mr. McKibben, than we were in the 1970s. You know, the environmental movement that the first environmental movement. And so what does this mean? This means that we are arguably, you know, making that hole in the ozone layer bigger, which is going to allow, so the greenhouse gases are making the hole in the ozone bigger, which is going to, again, attribute to increased fluctuations in temperature yearly, right? So global warming is going to be, you know, it means hotter summers, colder winters, shifting seasons, that sort of thing. So what does that, you know, and then again, saying that Trump isn't doing anything about this. So what do we need to do to combat all of these emissions that are being that are being expelled through this war? We need to plant more trees. We need to halt deforestation. We need to stop taking away animals' habitats. These are the things that we need to be doing to try and close the gap in the ozone. And then, you know, he's saying also that Trump is sort of, you know, going headstrong, or, you know, going forward with continuing to use oil, right, and not switching over to renewables, and not, you know, spearheading that shift. And other countries are. My thought on that is that Trump is a capitalist. He is a you know, a capitalist before he was president, and, you know, and that goes hand in hand with his television fame, with his, you know, he was, you know, a capitalist. He was what was his show? the I forget. Well, anyway, that's not the point. The point is Trump is a capitalist before he was the president. That was his reality. That was his claim to fame and reality TV. So, this is an opportunity. He's, and America is a capitalist society for whatever. I'm not putting judgment on this right now. I'm withholding judgment from this. However, America is a capitalist society and Trump is a capitalist. So I'm guessing that he is observing this opportunity that every other Western country plus China, so Western society plus China, they are barreling towards green energy, renewable energy, sustainable energy. And so that's going to leave a big gap in who can use oil, right? So if all of these Western societies plus China are proliferating the use of sustainable, green, renewable energy and moving away from fossil fuel consumption, that means that the non-Western world plus America is going to be able to use all of that oil that the Western countries and China are no longer using. So I feel like Trump is seeing that gap and saying, hey, well, if they're not going to use it, we'll use it, right? Like, we don't need to change just yet. Like, we can still keep going this way. If they're all going to change their infrastructure and change how they're, what sort of energy they're using, then we can continue to go this route since they're not using it. And I feel like that's most likely his mindset behind this, is he's seeing an opportunity and then capitalizing on that opportunity. In the grand scheme of things, is that going to make a difference in terms of our emissions? If everyone else is going green and we're just like not going green, we as like in America, the government, is that going to, well, it's not going to make it worse unless we just have a huge population boom and industrial boom. That could make it worse. However, if all of these European countries, all of these Western countries, plus China, and China is a big player in this, are switching over to renewables, then that's going to make a big difference in terms of the global emissions that we are expelling. So, I feel like that's probably where Trump is coming from. And there was something else I wanted to say. Oh, and then in terms of renewables. So we're also forgetting that nuclear is technically considered a renewable energy, right? Nuclear energy, is it fission or fusion? I forget. I am not a physicist. I am not a chemist. However, one of those is the one that blows up, I think, and the other one is the one that creates sustainable renewable energy. However, and that is considered a renewable, right? So France started with nuclear energy, I think back in the 90s, and they kind of spearheaded that. And my ex was saying for the longest time that Iran just wants to use nuclear energy to create sustainable energy, not create a nuclear bomb. But I think that we have enough technology that has made solar energy accessible, that we don't even have to consider nuclear energy, which is a really good thing, because even if we do use nuclear energy as a green resource, not as a bomb, there's still that uranium that needs to, we need to do something with that uranium once it has expired, right? So that is a problem. That uranium, that expired uranium is a problem. What do we do with that? We can just bury it underground, which is not good. We could ship it to the moon, which might be a better option. I don't know. Which actually is not completely out of left field anymore. We could send expired uranium to the moon. But really, if we don't have to do any of that, it would be so much easier to just use solar power, right? I mean, it's so much cheaper now and extremely accessible that we can just move away from all of the nuclear anything. Like, just forget nuclear anything. If this planet could just forget about nuclear anything, I think we would be better off. So those are my thoughts on the latest episode from Amanpour and Company. I think that in terms of sustainable green energy, solar is the way to go. I think Trump is capitalizing on capitalism and finding that opening in oil to say, hey, I think we can keep using this and not have to make that switch right away. And I am so grateful to hear the voices of the activist women in Iran being echoed, because that is what this war is about. You can say it's about oil. You can say it's about, tensions between Israel and Iran, but at the end of the day, like, we took out the last Ayatollah, and a lot of the regime, a lot of the people in the regime, the higher ups, this wouldn't be a thing if it wasn't such a human rights violation. And I love that we're not just forgetting and calling it an oil war. So let's thank you for keeping this conversation going. Yeah, so that's all from me right now. Thank you so much.